She sat at the table, smart, qualified, ready. But when it was her turn to speak, she stayed silent. Not because she didn't have any ideas, she had plenty, but because something inside of her whispered, "Don't rock the boat. Be agreeable. Stay safe." Does that sound familiar? Maybe you've also found yourself holding back, not because you lack the courage, but because the world taught you that speaking up comes at a cost. Maybe you've been rewarded for being low maintenance, for keeping the peace, and for being the one who doesn't make waves. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to feel the weight of that silence. If you've ever wondered whether your loyalty is costing you your alignment, if you question why you keep shrinking even though your ambition keeps rising, you're not alone. Today's guest, Dr. Elaine Lyn Hering, shows us this intimately. She's a best-selling author, leadership facilitator, and former Harvard Law lecturer who helps high-achieving women unlearn silence and reclaim their voice. By the end of this conversation, you'll shift from feeling muted, disconnected from your needs, and stuck in the good old girl loyalty to owning your voice as a leadership tool and choosing aligned expression without apology. Here are 3 powerful shifts we'll unpack. Why silence may have protected you once, but now is costing you power, presence, and possibility. How to recognize the difference between strategic silence and conditioned silence, and what it really means to use your voice even when you don't even say a word. This is also the first episode of season 3, where we're focusing on growth with others, because transformation doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in connection, in reflection, and in community. And that's what UnCeiling You is all about, helping ambitious women break past invisible ceilings by reclaiming their voice, redefining success, and rising on their own terms. So let's dive in. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Elaine Lyn Hering, for coming onto the podcast. I really am honored to have you onto the podcast. I feel like this discussion is very important, and it's the start of the season 3 of UnCeiling You, where we start to really dive into networking. And part of diving into networking with others is speaking, communicating, starting to raise our voice, daring to speak. And so you are the perfect person to start off the season. And so let's just talk first about why people are silent when they really should be speaking up. What is the origin of silence and conditioning? I really want to start with the root of how we learn to be silent, because so many of us think silence is a personality trait, but your work shows that it's actually something we learned, where we see that we've been conditioned, especially for women, marginalized professionals, and high achievers.
Yeah, let me start with what silence is and what it isn't, because there's so much talk and the phrases like silence is golden, right? And who wouldn't want more of that meditative pause when you're at the top of your yoga mat and that inner tranquility? That's great. That's not the silence we're talking about. The silence I'm talking about is when there's not enough room in the relationship or on the team or in the org for your needs, goals, hopes, and concerns. When it feels like you have to bite your tongue in order to keep the peace. When you did not rock the boat in order to keep your job, stay in your marriage, have health insurance, whatever it be, that silence feels like the only option when it actually isn't. And I'll just put front and center that connection to networking, which is we can't actually connect with other people if they don't know who we are. Now, we can't share with them who we are if we don't know who we are and what we need and what we want. And so the silencing is both, do I say things? Do I share? Do I disclose? But it's also, do I listen to myself? And part of learned silence, particularly when we carry subordinated identities, meaning anytime you're not the dominant identity, right? You're a woman in a male dominant environment. You're Asian American in a majority white space. To take my own example, anytime you carry a subordinated identity, you're more likely to be othered, more likely to be questioned, more likely to be left out. All of this gets at, well, how do we learn learn silence. I learned silence because I'm the youngest daughter of an immigrant family from Taiwan to the United States. I share all of that because in my culture of origin, to be the daughter meant I'm not as important as the sons. That's just a statement of fact. And it also meant that if I questioned my father, I was disrespectful. You start to see how we learn silence.
Yes.
And I realized it's not just me and my family. As I started doing this work, talking with people, my Hispanic sisters taught me the phrase, calladita te ves más bonita, which roughly translated is you're prettier when you shut up.
Ooh.
And they sat at their kitchen tables with their grandmothers who repeated this because that's the system they grew up in. Those are the survival strategies that you have. As an immigrant, you're often just trying to blend in, assimilate, fit in, not stick out, not be weird because you want to be accepted. And so we learn to silence the uniqueness about ourselves because we're often taught to imitate other people who have already been successful. We are taught to silence our needs, goals, hopes, and concerns because that makes us easy to work with and a quote unquote good team player.
Right.
Right. And you get rewarded for that. I think that was one of my big discoveries, that it wasn't just that I didn't speak up. It was that I was rewarded for staying silent, because, particularly entry level, because it made me easy to work with. Right? If you are choosing between a team member who has a lot of demands, needs, goals, hopes, and concerns, which in negotiation speak, we would just call interests, and everyone has them, or someone who doesn't seem to have any interests that you don't have to solve for, you see leaders repeatedly choosing and rewarding the team member who's easy to work with because you don't have to solve for them. Is it right? No. Does it happen all the time? Yes. And then our work is, well, are we actually diagnosing the issue accurately? Because so many conversations say, especially women, it's not a silence thing. It's a you need to speak up more, better, clearer, louder. You need more courage. You need more confidence. Essentially go fix yourself and then maybe we'll talk, right? Maybe we'll respect you. And that misdiagnosis fuels an industry called leadership development and makes it really profitable for everyone else. But for me, it actually starts with an accurate diagnosis of the situation. The key question isn't how do I speak up better? The question is, what role does silence play in my life and my leadership? And if we can answer that and choose our relationship with silence, we've got a much better shot at driving our own careers, living fulfilling lives, and really leading and showing up in this world in a way that is meaningful and impactful for us.
That's interesting. So how can you then diagnose the situation where you are silent because you're being protective? And if that's the case, how do we know that it's no longer serving us? And how do we really get ourselves to speak up so that we are being served?
Yeah. I want to, again, complexify because there's so much nuance to this. One is that voice isn't just the words that we say or don't say in a meeting, right? Voice is how we move through the world. So speaking up, to use that term, could also be, how am I influencing the world around me? That definition is important because it actually broadens the range of things we can do. So often we think if I'm going to use my voice, it's got to be talking in a live situation, preferably in 3 succinct bullet points. No ums, just the right amount of emotion to show that you care, but not too much, particularly if you present as a woman, right? And that's how you're supposed to speak up. Versus every choice we make, whether you take the time to sit with someone, whether you ask, how are you doing, and genuinely mean it, whether you open the door or let it slam shut on someone when you're going to the grocery store, all of that actually impacts the people in the world around you. So I just, particularly for folks who are more introverted or who don't love public speaking, there are so many avenues for how you use your voice, when voice is actually, how are you going to use your gifts, skills, talents in this world? So there's that piece of it. And then there's really thinking about, am I choosing the silence or does it feel like the only option? And so to your question of how do I know if silence is still serving me? Well, my question is, are your needs being met? Are your needs being met? And that takes some deep excavating at times. And I say this as a mother, I say this as a wife, I say this as a team member, right? It feels like our needs, goals, hopes, and concerns they're not even on the back burner. They're so far stuffed down beneath who needs hydrocortisone today? And did I pack a lunch? To think about, what do I want? Or what do I need? What might I want? Do I have space to dream? And to realize that my life and my relationships might not be set up for that is actually deeply painful.
Yeah, for sure. And it's hard to look at and easier to take off the stove and put it in the cabinet.
Even open that can of worms. But who benefits in that?
Everybody else.
Everybody else. And who's maybe dying a slow death in there?
Yeah.
Right? And that's the thing about things that remain silent, which is just because we're not speaking about them doesn't mean they're not. So my book is actually structured in two parts. The first is awareness, right? This misdiagnosis that benefits everyone else because we're so busy trying to come up with more confidence or courage that we don't actually solve for the real issue. And then the second part is action. If we have that awareness, then how might I choose a step going forward? And I think about this all the time, particularly those of us who are acculturated, and women typically are, to be others oriented, service oriented. My neighbor's having a tough week at work, so I offered to bring them dinner. And she said, that'd be amazing, especially if it comes with the side of social interaction with you. And I went, yeah, you just broadened the ask. You just broadened the ask. The food I can manage, but the energy and the presence, particularly if I need to hold space for you, which as your friend I want to, that's a different ask. And do I go along with it because that's what a good neighbor, a good friend would do? Right. Or do I draw a boundary? And my friend Pooja Lakshman, the author of Real Self-Care, says boundaries are not co-created. So I don't actually need to ask permission from someone else. Is it okay if I don't do this? Right? I can actually just say, no, I don't have it in me today, but I totally can guarantee you food. And it'll be hot. Right? But am I listening to what I need versus being in autopilot catering to everyone else in my life but myself?
Like the fact that you say using your voice doesn't always involve your voice box.
Yeah.
It involves what you're paying attention to. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Go deeper?
Yeah. I mean, this goes to Deepa Iyer's work around social movements. It can feel like, actually, let me back up and just take it personally, which is back in 2020, I was nursing a newborn. My father was going through chemo. George Floyd had been murdered. It felt like if you weren't out on the streets protesting, then you're not using your voice. And I thought, but if I look at my life right now, I'm trying to keep my father's immune system, what's left of it, in a stable state, trying to keep this newborn alive. And so it can't be that there's only one way to use your voice.
Right.
Right? Just because I'm not doing X doesn't mean that I don't believe Y, even if the binaries in the world would have us believe that. And there's another reality, which is the world doesn't need more Elaines. The world needs Natalie, right? The gifts, skills, experiences, perspective, heart that you have, we don't need more of someone else. And so this striving to become a good imitation of someone else feels a little futile. Instead of trying to be an imitation of someone else, why not be the best version of yourself? And that to me is, how are you moving through the world? What choices are you making? How are you spending your resources, money, time, energy, presence? All of that fundamentally impacts the people around you.
Yes.
That is, you're changing the world. You're changing somebody's world.
Right.
And any of us who have ever had a tough coworker or a bad manager know what a big difference someone who cares, someone who listens, someone who thinks and considers us makes.
Yeah.
That's voice.
There you go. So it's really, and again, digging deep and really understanding yourself and laying claim to that and saying, hey, it's okay to not only take it out of the cabinet, but put it on the stove and put it on the front burner.
Yes, because if you burn out, which you do if you're not tending to your needs, goals, hopes, and concerns over time, you're actually good to no one.
Right.
And I know if I care about my kid and I want to be present for my kid, I actually need to be okay too. I need to be healthy enough. My needs need to be sufficiently met, right? I'm a realist to know that not all my dreams for going away for a girls' weekend at a 5-star hotel, that's not happening for maybe the next 10 years. But can I have a cup of tea and 5 minutes when I don't have someone climbing over me? That's probably doable. And so we get caught, particularly again, women, in this, we're supposed to be selfless, or having needs makes you selfish. I'd argue no, having needs actually just makes you human.
Now, some people feel like they're stuck in a situation where loyalty and silence are falsely equated. What advice do you have for someone who notices a pattern of being subtly undermined, but fears they'll be seen as disloyal or dramatic if they speak up? And this is especially helpful for people who think they're being wise when they're actually being paralyzed.
Yeah. I love that distinction. Again, whether silence is additive and strategic or damaging or oppressive, the difference is agency. Are you choosing it? And I parse this out in detail in chapter 3 of the book of silence is strategic. And those subordinate identities and the treatment, that's all real. So I don't want to deny it. At the same time, the trap that many of us fall into is that we forget we have a choice because silence is familiar. It is more comfortable than the unknown. I go back to Albert Hirschberg's work here from the 1970s in organization. So I'll get a little nerdy and then try to get us to this outcome. Hirschberg argues in an organization or on a team, there are 3 choices: exit, voice, or loyalty. If voice, saying what you think, having your own perspective, asking questions is not an option, then the only 2 options left are exit or loyalty. Then the good people who have the opportunity to leave exit. What are you left with? You're left with loyalists, people who will tell the manager or the leader what they say they want to hear. And you end up with groupthink and an echo chamber. And it's a dynamic that's at the heart of every corporate scandal in the last 200 years. Right. The people who spoke up got reorged. The people who spoke up were fired. What are you left with? And it's actually an invitation for leaders of why we need voice on our teams, because we cannot make sound decisions on flawed or incomplete data sets. But it goes to this piece of those are the 3 choices. We have the choice of voice, exit, and loyalty, even if it seems like loyalty is the only option. And it takes us back to classic negotiation work around BATNAs, right? Your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If you feel like staying at this company in this job is the only option, what if you had a job offer waiting for you somewhere else? Your BATNA, your best alternative to the current state, is much stronger. And so there's that background work of what is my BATNA and how might I improve it? Because the fundamental question is, how well does the current state meet my needs? And if it's not meeting my needs sufficiently, or enough of them, right? Maybe you're in a job for the health insurance. Maybe you're in the job to pay the bills. Maybe you're not there for a meaningful connection with your coworkers, and that could be fine. But don't forget that you have other options, including how do I make the other options or alternatives stronger and better?
And hence the need for networking.
And networking, I'm one of these people, so I'll own it. Networking, I get like, vibes. And Rosalind Chow's work, she has a new book out called The Doors You Can Open, really transformed my thinking around networking, because my original thought was you go into those mixers where you don't know anyone and you put on your name tag and everyone makes small talk and sizes you up to be like, are you worth talking to or not? And it feels awful. Versus Rosalind's definition of networking is how can we get to know one another and help each other solve problems? That feels much more doable, but also starts with, am I okay sharing with other people who I am?
Right. Knowing who I am and then sharing it.
Yes. And that we each are more than the job title we currently hold or don't hold. Because when that job title and org disappears, and I say this as someone who's walked that path, it feels like, well, I guess I'm not useful to anyone, right? I used to be a managing partner at a global leadership development firm affiliated with the Harvard Negotiation Project. You walk into those rooms and people are like, interesting. And when those titles were no longer with me, people were like, I'm still the same person.
Right.
Right? We're still the same people. And what people can't take away from us, our employers cannot take away from us, are our experiences, our expertise, if we are willing and able to see the value in them.
Yes.
And I'd argue that that's really hard to do by yourself, particularly when we're humble and acculturated, maybe to make ourselves smaller, versus do you have a friend? Do you have a coach, someone who says, Natalie, right? I think you're brilliant in this way. I've never seen anyone more present with you. And you start to think, maybe there is something about me that wasn't associated with a title or with an org, something to offer.
Yeah. So, and I love that it is so important to really identify and dissect what it is that you bring to any team, not just to the team that you're on. Sometimes that's really hard. I know for myself, I would say, okay, I did this project. It was successful. What part of it was mine? What did I uniquely contribute to this project? And that exercise is completely revealing.
Yes, including how the company or the team values your contributions. I say this because women are often doing the emotional labor and housekeeping. Right? We are the lubricant that makes these relationships work, but it is not typically what is rewarded in performance reviews and promotions. It does not mean that it is any less valuable of a contribution. Right? It is the secret sauce that actually makes the team work. Do we see that and own that even if those around us and the systems around us don't value it in the same way? I'd also argue that there's a piece of if you're new to the team or you're the only, it can be hard to own that perspective. And for me, the shift is how do I take what might feel like a vulnerability into really seeing it as the value add? So take the example of you're new onto a project, new onto a team. You've been there 2 weeks. You might be worried about asking a stupid question or a question that makes you seem silly or not in the know.
Right.
Now, the reality is people who have been in the system for a long time cannot see what is wrong with the system. You've been drinking the water and breathing the air for so long. You can't see what's weird about the fact that the whole system you've built is held up with duct tape and paper clips. So
isn't it appropriate to be held up by duct tape and paper clips?
Yes, which is also, though, this question of why would we doubt the perspective we have and instead frame your contribution in that, right? Looking at this with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
Here's what I see.
Yeah. Can we use some wood maybe?
Termite pressure treated.
Yes.
Right? But that it can make us hesitant if we're new or we're not a technical person or we're not a legal person or we are the legal person, we stick out versus, hey, coming at it from a legal perspective.
Right.
And really owning whatever view we have. My favorite phrase, if we're looking really tangibly, is from where I sit. Right? From where I sit, that deadline doesn't make sense. From where I sit, I don't see how we're going to achieve those goals. From where I sit allows you to own the legitimacy and the limitation of your own perspective. It also naturally begs the question, well, Natalie, what does it look like from where you sit? So that difference isn't conflict. That difference is conversation.
And I think that is super powerful. Now we talk about how important it is to have our team members speak up. And so as a leader, I know I personally try to stay as approachable as I possibly can, but yet I see team members stay silent. And so what do I do as a leader when I know that a person's perspective is super important. I get a sense that even if I directly ask them, hey, tell me what you're thinking, they still feel hesitant. How do I get them to really open up?
So there's chapter 5 of my book and chapter 9 of the book, but I'll try to do the 30-second version here. And folks who want to take a deeper dive can. Number 1 is to realize that you as a leader, it's actually not about you. Meaning that power dynamic, right? Why folks might hesitate to speak up, that often has to do with the baggage and history that they have, and we all have it, right? But they're not seeing you, Natalie, they're seeing the manager they had 4 jobs ago who shot them a look when they said the thing, even if they were hesitant to. Right? Or the weird uncle who used to make things difficult for them. We all come with history, and that's part of our own work of unlearning silence, to separate the present from the past, but also having the wisdom to know what of the past is worth filtering through and informing the wisdom. And there's such a delicate balance there. But as a leader, to not take it personally. Right? Because they're not seeing you, they're seeing your job title or they're seeing the former manager. The second is to think about what unintentional barriers might be there. What I mean by that is if we communicate most effectively by talking, we, unless we're intentional, assume that other people do that too. But everybody is wired differently. And in the absence of intentionally designing the way that we interact, we default to the communication patterns and preferences of the people with the most power, typically you, the leader. So this question, and I outline it in the book of, are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? As a bona fide morning person, I cannot fathom that there are some people for whom their best thinking and clearest mind is 1 p.m. in their local time zone, right? That's the post-lunch slump. That's when I need to take a nap. And yet I've asked this question in enough groups of a sample size that people are like, yeah, that's my power hour.
And some people, 8 p.m. OMG.
Yes. Married to one of them.
My.
married to one of them, right? And we basically can only talk about serious things like financial planning between noon and 1.
Oh my gosh.
Because any earlier it does not go well for him, any later it does not go well for me. But time of day, whether we are video on, video off, in person, whether it is a small group, large group, whether it is real time or asynchronous, whether it is typing or talking, all of us respond to those choices differently. So question number 1 is, do you know what modes and mediums make it easiest for you to share your voice, right? Share your thoughts, insights, and expertise. If you manage a team, do you know what makes it easiest for the people on your team? Because they may say, Natalie, don't ask me a question in the meeting, right? But I'll give you a 4-page analysis afterwards that would be better than anything you can get anywhere else.
Right.
And are there times where we actually want and need them to speak up in the meeting? And are there times when we could do it asynchronously and written? This is not to say we can then only communicate with the other person in that way. It's not a directive or a diatribe. But even that intel of what makes it easier or harder for you to share your insights, expertise, and thoughts helps us understand each other better.
Right.
And then we can redesign our standing meetings to optimize for voice. Number 1, should it even be a meeting? Number 2, is 9 a.m. a horrible time for everybody?
Yeah.
Right? And my favorite are post-processors versus real-time processors. If you've ever been in a meeting where you're sitting there, you can't quite figure out what to say, but 20 minutes after you click out of the meeting, you're like, that's what I wanted to say.
Yes.
Right? Then we get the performance feedback that we need to be quicker on our feet, or we go home and we stew on it and I think, should I reply all? Should I pick up the phone? I can't figure it out. It's too overwhelming. Never mind. I'll just stay silent.
Yeah.
Versus that's post-processing. In technical speak, it's like your computer, your brain needs to cache and compile the data.
Yeah.
And we're wired differently versus real-time processors. The more we talk something out in the moment, the more clear it gets.
Right.
And you can see how that pairing is really painful.
Yep.
The leader who's a real-time processor keeps talking, keeps filling up the space. And these people are like, will you shut up and let me think?
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that. And it's like, oh, please process later and then tell me what you came up with.
Yes. And so why don't we say that, right? We still have that meeting for the real-time processors, but at the end, instead of just calling the decision, it's all right, everyone sleep on it. As you post-process, share what comes up by replying all on that email or putting it in Slack. But you're doing 2 things. You're normalizing post-processing and you're making clear the avenue for re-engaging the conversation so people don't get overwhelmed with, what am I supposed to text or call or talk or
yes,
telepathy, right?
And why did you not get that message?
Yes, because I cannot read your mind.
Right. So one of the other things that you talk about in your book is that you say just because you have a seat at the table doesn't mean that your voice is welcome. Mm-hmm. So what are the subtler signs that, especially in a corporate setting, that someone's voice isn't actually welcomed?
I think it's a lot of the same signals that we get day to day. Right. And there are different statistics about communication and that the words are actually maybe 7% of the communication, depending on what study you look at. But it's when I share my perspective, does someone sort of catch the message and acknowledge it and build upon it? Or does the conversation just move on? Am I expected to just be loyal and go along with the majority? Or am I actually there to lend my perspective? And many of us who inhabit those seats, we do test cases, right? Let me ask the question, sort of dip my toe, and based on the response, I may choose either to continue to express my thoughts, or I may backtrack because it seems hostile or not open to what I'm really thinking. I'd also argue that it is not your job to single-handedly change the dynamic. Board chairs, where are you? Fellow board members, fellow leadership team, L team members, where are you? Do you care about each person actually bringing their perspectives, the richness of that? Or do you want to tick a box and say, well, we've got one woman, that's enough.
Right. And
how you react in the moment, it's not typically hidden. Right? It's does someone acknowledge, Natalie, that was a fantastic point. Thanks so much. We should really look into that. Or does the conversation just move on?
Right.
And it is often a cycle then of how much we choose to share of our thoughts and our efforts, because banging your head against a brick wall time and again just doesn't make sense. Or some might say is the definition of insanity.
Right.
Where I see women And where I have fallen into the trap of is because we are the first, because we are the few, because we are the only, to use Deepa Purushothaman's words around this, I'm the first woman to make partner, I'm the first woman to be on this board, then it feels like, well, I can't fail. Because if I fail this, or I prove that women can't do X, right? So I'm carrying the weight of all women, all Asian American women, whatever identities you hold.
Yeah.
And to that, I'd say our inability to single-handedly change a system is not a personal failure.
Right.
We matter too.
Yeah, we need to take that weight off of our shoulders.
There's already enough weights for us to carry.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I also kind of, coming from a sales background, I did work in sales. I also find that, they didn't hear me today, but possibly they're going to hear me tomorrow if I present it a different way. I mean, especially if, and I know that we talked about there's different ways, it's not all about just communication, but at the same time, there are some things that I'm like, well, at work, they call me a dog on a bone. And there is a reason for it.
Yeah.
And it's because I don't let go of a point,
Yeah.
especially when I feel like it's important for the organization. And to a fault, I'll overturn every single solitary rock I can, maybe sometimes 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And just because of that, sometimes I get heard and it's rewarded, but it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And I don't think there's any right or wrong answer.
Right.
Meaning, if that's where you want to put your time, energy, and efforts, fantastic. God bless you. Right? Because not everybody has it in them to do that. Not because they're weak, not because they can't hack it, but because we only have so many spoons to go around, right? There's only so much of us to go around. And if you're spending it in one place, then you're not spending it in another place.
That is a very good point.
That trade-off, though, is one that only you can make.
Right.
Including, is it worth it to me?
Right.
To be a dog on a bone because this is the thing that really matters to me. Typically that is in alignment with your values.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And also, how receptive is this system to me?
Right.
Because people do need to hear things different ways, different times.
Right.
They might also be post-processors, so they could have a negative reaction in the moment, but you've still planted the seed.
Yes.
Right? Whether you want to continue to water that seed or excavate or fertilize, now we're just mixing metaphors.
Yeah.
That's up to you. That's up to you. But that is also where you are choosing to invest and let it be your choice rather than one out of guilt or shame or I've got to do this for all of humanity or all women or whatever it is.
Exactly. So, I just feel like I can talk to you forever about this. It's such a powerful topic. I'm really happy and excited that you've produced a book that can help people go deeper, but tell us more about some of the things that you have available for corporations and for people related to this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the book is Unlearning Silence, How to Speak Your Mind, Unleash Talent, and Live More Fully. And there are 2 groups of people that I wanted to reach with it. And there's overlap, of course. The first was anyone who has been underestimated, who has been misdiagnosed and told you need to go fix yourself. I want to be the first to say it's not you. There's this thing called silence. It impacts all our lives. And the question is, what do we want to do about it? And I hope you feel seen, known, and heard by my work. And the second is well-intentioned leaders, because I have never met a leader who actually wanted to squash someone's potential or hopes and dreams, who wanted to shut them down instead of lift them up. I've never met a leader like that. And yet I'd argue all of us have worked for leaders who do just that. And so chapter 5 in particular, how we silence each other, even when we don't intend, is an invitation to say, how can I actually bring my leadership more in alignment with how I actually want to show up? And they're fairly straightforward fixes like, are we on Zoom or are we exchanging emails? Right? That has a differential impact. So my work really is to keynote speak, to facilitate workshops, to help people develop these skills, both to use your own voice, excavate and find your voice if it's been buried in there. And then leaders, how do you create spaces that are cultures of voice, where people can thrive, where fundamentally you can unleash your team's full potential rather than squash that. And that looks like bringing me in to speak, bringing me in to work with your team. Again, all of this is theory until we put it into practice. So we do it in an as lighthearted way as we can to make it sticky and really allow you to do good work in this world.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. What is the best way for people to find you?
Yeah. ElaineLynHering.com. It's herring with one R instead of how the fish is spelled. And, if we could put it in the show notes otherwise, but that's the best way to reach me.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on. I have a feeling I'll have you back.
I'd be delighted. And thank you for what you're doing. I mean, unsealing, unlearning it's when I saw the title of your podcast, it was just like, how do we not know about each other yet? So I'm so grateful for what you're doing in the community you're building and have built. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Elaine helped us reframe silence not as a personality trait, but as programming. She taught us how to reconnect with our needs without guilt. And Elaine showed us how to lead with authenticity, not compliance. So this is what season 3 is here to show you. That growth doesn't happen in isolation. Your voice isn't just for you. It's the starting point of a community, influence, and the momentum you're meant to build. At UnCeiling You, we're here to help you. Own your ambition, use your voice, and rise into the life you know you're here to lead. If you're ready to go deeper, come join us at the Unsealing Zone. It's where sparked and unsealed members get exclusive bonus content, live Q&As with guests like Elaine, and tools to take real action, not just notes. You've been quiet long enough. Join us at the Unsealing Zone and rise with others who are done playing small. Until next time, remember, your voice matters. And when you rise, the ripple starts.